Hey guys, it's Eddie the Magic Monk. Welcome to another Bootstrap lesson. Last lesson we taught you how to make an inline form, which is just a form with one single line. And today we want to talk about vertical and horizontal forms. So let's firstly copy and paste this form that we made last lesson and put it on the bottom of the page. So where is the code? Here's the code for this inline form. So let's copy that, paste it right at the bottom just before /body. Okay, so let's paste that in here and let's wrap it around a container, div class, container fluid, and give it a background color. And let's close off the container after the form. So if I have a look at what it looks like now, it'll have a form at the bottom of the page with an inline set out. So let's talk about how to change this so the form becomes bigger, becomes more substantial rather than just a single line. So let's try getting rid of this hyphen inline extension in the class and see what happens. And you can see already after I get rid of it, okay, it's got first name, box, email box. Now there are a few problems with this set out. Okay, the first one is you can see the label is on top of the input box. So you might want to have the label beside the input box. And the second problem is that the input box is pretty wide. I mean, when you want to enter someone's first name, you probably don't need it to be this big. Okay, so let's firstly fix that first problem where I want the label next to the box. So what we need to do is we need to change this to another type of form called horizontal form. So we need to add to the class, rather than just form, we need to add form horizontal. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to change. And then the second thing we need to change, which needs to be added to the label, is we need to call this control label class equals control label. Okay, if we don't do that, then Bootstrap is not going to style it properly. And then we also need for the form control for the input, we need to put that inside a separate div, and you will see why in a second. Okay, so let's put that underneath this separate division. Okay, so now we have a label and a slash label and then a div and a slash div within one form group. So if I save this and refresh, let's see what happens with this. Is not much has happened. It's gotten rid of some margin on the left, so it's right now touching the edge of the div of the background. But what we really want is I want this text to be next to the input box. So the next thing we need to do is we need to specify using the Bootstrap grid how many columns I want the label to take up and how many columns I want the input box to take up. So let's put that inside the class for label. Okay, so let's put that inside the class for label, and let's put column small device 2. So this means that on any device that is bigger or equal to the small device, which is like a tablet or something like that, then the first name label is going to take up 2 columns out of 12. So if you imagine the width of the page divided into 12 columns, the label first name is going to take up 2 of the columns. And then I want the input class, I want the input box to take up column SM10. Okay, I want the input box to take up 10 columns. So you might say, well, why can't I just copy and paste that into the class for the input? And that is because the input tag does not have a closing tag, so it's not a container. You can only put the Bootstrap grid class inside a container type class where there's a opening and a closing tag. So the input tag does not have a closing tag, so you cannot put this inside the class. So that's why we created an extra division. Okay, so if I save this and refresh the page, you should be able to see some differences. There you go. First name into first name. Okay, so you might see that Dreamweaver has given us a bit of a red error message, and that is because previously on the page I've already got first name as the name of that label. So just to make it go away, I'm gonna call the name, I'm just gonna get rid of the one liner at the top for now. So if I go back up to the top, I'm going to get rid of the first name. Okay, and I'm gonna call the email newsletter, email news. And I'm gonna change the ID to email news and the name to email news. But I'm gonna leave the type as email. So now that should get rid of the red messages. So if I save that and refresh the page, okay, still looks the same because I've basically just fixed some errors. So now I want the email to also look like this. So let's make the changes. We got the label class is a control label class equals control label, and it's going to take up 2 columns. And then I've got the input box wrapped inside a division with a class of 10 columns. And then let's put /div just after the input box. So now we're going to have the second input box in the exact same way as the first input box. Okay, we got label, text box, label, text box. And then hopefully you want the button to also line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to wrap it inside a form group tag. So I'm going to wrap the submit button, just the submit button, inside a form group tag. And then again, because the button is an object, so I'm going to wrap that inside a division class. And then I'm going to put a class of column SM10. And this is not going to work, but I'm just going to show you what it looks like first. So you can see that if I refresh this, the button is still on the left. Okay, why is that? Because we've said that the button will take up 10 columns. So if you divide this up into 12, the button is going to take up 10 columns on the left, so it's correct. But what we want is we want to take up 10 columns on the right. So what we need to do is add another setting in front of the class called column SM offset 2. And what this means is that I will move the 10 columns to the right 2 places. So skip 2 columns at the front and then have your 10 columns. So as soon as you do that, save it. Okay, save it, and if I refresh the page, okay, it's got the button underneath the 2 vertical forms, and it's nicely set out, so you have the label and the text, the label and the text. So that's great. So let's add in something else. So let's say we have first name. Now we can add a few things. We can add last name, change the label to last name, change the ID to last name. Make sure that, because it's case sensitive, make sure that they're all lowercase. Probably should have done that in the last tutorial. Last name, enter last name. Okay, so now you can expand on your form in this setout. So you got first name, last name, email, and so on. Now, one last thing we're going to change is that you can still see that the text box is taking too much of your page. If I move it to the right, look at how long this text box becomes. It becomes a bit ridiculous how long it is. Okay, so in order to fix that, I'm going to add in another setting. So just before the column SM10, I'm going to change that to column SM8. Column SM8, column SM8, column SM8. And you will see that because the text box, it was taking up 10 columns, now it's only going to take up 8 columns. So if you refresh, they become a lot shorter. And then even if you extend, it gets bigger as well, but it's only going to take up 8 columns. Rather than taking up 10 columns. Okay, so that's another way you can reduce the size of each text box. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.